All right. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Havens, and I serve the fraternity as the Director of Chapter Services. I am excited that you have all decided to join me for this overview of facilitating the Pledge Education program. As some of you may have your academic year sneaking up just around the corner, I know we have one chapter in the country here that started their academic year today. So I'm joined today by one of our educational leadership consultants, Aaron Rivera, who will be monitoring the chat for any questions or technical difficulties. So you can feel free to unmute and ask questions as we move along, or you can send them to Aaron in a chat. This session is being recorded and will be available on Delta Sig University for future reference. Additionally, please feel free to screenshot any of these slides for your personal use later. Just a quick overview of our agenda for tonight. I'm going to start with reviewing our pledging and initiation policies and discuss the difference between the policies and the actual program curriculum. And then I'm going to jump into reviewing the messaging pledge educators and pledges receive throughout the program, resources for facilitating the program, a brief overview of each meeting, some common violations of the policy we've seen over the last year, and then we'll open it up fully for a Q&A for everyone. But again, as we go along, if you have additional questions, please feel free to shoot them in the chat. Aaron will get them out, or unmute and ask away. So I'm gonna take a quick minute just to mention the difference between the pledging and initiation policy versus the pledging and initiation program curriculum. The policy is set by the board of directors and can be found in letter G of our National Policies and Procedures Manual, located on dsp.org/policies. The Pledge Education Program curriculum has been designed by a team of volunteers with feedback from collegiate members to be utilized as part of the Pledge Education meetings. The program curriculum and resources can be found at dsp.org/pledge guide, one word. Okay, so let me highlight some of the policies, and as we're going through this and after this program, I encourage you all to review them in detail, to be as familiar with them as you begin your programs as you can. So jumping in, let's start with the purpose of Pledge Education. So the purpose of Pledge Education is to formally present fraternity history and information to our potential members and begin the integration into chapter on a provisional basis in order to make the best possible brothers. The Pledge Education program is about developing brothers and brotherhood, and not necessarily about their professional development. And we'll get a little bit more deeper into that as we go through the program. The program is a 4 to 5 week, 4 to 5 meeting program, which means that it is no less than 28 days and no more than 35 days from pledging ceremony to initiation. And as you were submitting your Pledge Education programs back in June, you may have gotten some feedback from our educational and leadership consultants of being outside of those guidelines. So again, those are going to come into play again as we talk about some of the challenges we saw chapters facing during last year. You must follow the Pledge Education Guide, or our Pledge Education curriculum. Again, that can be found at dsp.org/pledge guide. Quizzes, comprehensive exam are all delivered via online modules. So there's not a paper quiz or a paper final or asking of the questions in a chapter meeting. Everything is done in the online modules. All pledges must have a hard copy of the Crown and Delta, the Pledge Education program, and the chapter's bylaws, policies, and procedures. All of those things, or excuse me, the Pledge Education program and the bylaws, policies, and procedures for your chapter should be handed out during the first meeting. I will talk about that as we're looking at that individual program. You'll want to make sure that you order copies of the Crown and Delta ahead of time, have a good idea of who is going to be in your Pledge Education program so that you have copies. This past year, we did have a PDF version available. We will have that PDF version available for you again. However, a hard copy of the document must be purchased since it is an interactive part of the program. Pledging and initiation fees is $150 per pledge. $70 of it goes to a national initiation fee, $50 of it is the badge lease, and $30 of it is local initiation fee. So that's going to cover any supplies that you need to make, copies that you need to make, and that does include the cost of the Crown and Delta within that $30. Pledges attend all pledge education and chapter meetings, as well as chapter events that are mandated for brothers. There should not be any pledge-only mandated events. They should be held to the same attendance expectations as initiated brothers. If it is something that is mandatory for initiated brothers, it can also be mandatory for pledges. But if it is an option for initiated brothers, it is also an option for pledges. Keep in mind, though, and that this is the responsibility of the Vice President of Pledge Education to kind of monitor this, any pledge education fraternity activity for pledges cannot exceed 6 hours in total on a Sunday to Saturday week, and any changes to their schedule need to be communicated at least 7 days in advance. Okay. Last slide on the policy, I promise. Couple of things that you can include pledges in. Pledges can serve on chapter committees. Don't start creating committees for the sake of creating committees. If your chapter is already utilizing committees, maybe you hold a couple of spots on those committees for pledges, especially if you have a recruitment committee, because the individuals who are in the pledge education process at that time are going to be your biggest advocates. And so you can, even though you're not in an official recruitment week, there's no reason why you still can't be recruiting for either a second program during the fall term or for your next term. And so get those people that are really excited about it. Big Brother pairings will be announced at the first pledge meeting to take place on the same day of the pledging ceremony so that big brothers can assist their little brothers from the beginning of the pledging process. Okay, lots of words. I'm going to boil it down. Your pledging ceremony, big brother introductions, and pledge education meeting 1 all happen at the same time. It is about a 90-minute meeting, and I will walk through that a little bit as we look at the curriculum for meeting 1. Please know that any big brother introductions that you are wanting to host, there is a pre-approved list. If there's something that you are interested in facilitating for your big brother introductions that is not on that list, you can always email hub@dsp.org. We'll take a look at it. We'll have a dialogue. We'll get find out what it is that you're looking to accomplish and see what we can do to get that approved. Last and most important is that there are 3 primary evaluation methods when deciding if a pledge should be initiated. Have they attended things and participated in the things that they need to attend and participate in? Are they good people? That's what the conduct piece means. Quizzes and exams are kind of that tertiary or third level. They are not the be all end all, even though they are available. Okay. There's a lot of messaging that goes out to both VPPEs and to pledges during the pledge education process. You're going to receive weekly messages to prepare and remind both of you about the upcoming meeting. It is imperative, and I'm going to stress that again, it is imperative that pledges are reported within 2 days, which is policy of the pledging ceremony. It's a best practice to submit that report right after pledging, okay, and right after pledge meeting 1. If that report is not submitted, then pledges will not receive any messaging, and their personalized links to access the modules they won't get. Okay. Each meeting, or following each meeting, pledges should receive an email the next morning, which will include the date of their next meeting, as well as their personalized link to the next pledge education module. If there are any changes in your meeting dates, please, please, please communicate them with the central office by emailing hub@dsp.org so we can get those updated, since it will impact the timing of when that messaging goes out. Also, keep in mind that these messages will initially go to the email address provided when the individual is entered into the hub as a recruit. So as you're recruiting, you may want to work with your senior vice president to collect the individual's preferred email address to be entered later, so that you can save some issues for pledges later on down the road. A number of times this past year, we've had pledges contact us that they weren't getting the emails to the email address that they preferred. So we made a number of changes for them. So if you can log them in right when you are recruiting them, that's even better. Now, VPPEs, you should expect to receive an email the day prior to a meeting that's going to remind you of the meeting topics, and it's going to give you a link to the pledge education guide, or excuse me, the pledge education meeting plan for that upcoming meeting, as well as some additional useful information. Some of it is, remembering to order badges or filling out your initiation forms or things like that, depending on the timing of the messaging. So let me talk a little bit about the resources that we have for facilitating the program. In addition to the messaging you're going to receive, we have a resource page that you can access without waiting for those timed emails. You can jump on it right now. The Pledge Education resource page is going to be your best friend throughout facilitating the curriculum. You can start looking at it and preparing now, as I had mentioned. It will provide you with some great tips for facilitating the program, how to use the guide under the Getting Started heading. It's then going to move into the Pledge Education guide itself, which again, per policy must be followed, which are all of those individual meeting plans. Each meeting plan is separated out with any supporting materials, as well as a tutorial video for what you might be able to expect and prepare for when facilitating. And yes, you will have to listen to my boring voice again. It will also have any supporting materials specifically for that meeting right there for you to download. On the left-hand side of the screen, when you are on this page, you can see the link to the PDF version of the Crown and Delta. As I mentioned earlier, they still need to be ordered. They still need to have a hard copy in hand, but you can utilize this PDF to get started if your books have not yet arrived. Remember, it's an interactive piece of the curriculum. It is used in a number of different ways. Lastly, this page does also have access for initiated members who have never seen the online modules to access them. This access is different than the personalized link pledges will receive in their messaging. So do not send pledges to this page to access the modules. You will not be able to track their progress if you do. And speaking of tracking their progress, another resource I want to point out is, excuse me, the pledge module completion report on the hub. The chapter president and the VPPE will have access to see this report in the hub, as well as your local volunteer leaders. You can track your pledge's progress by logging into the hub and looking for the reports button on the left-hand side. You will then check your drop-down menu for a report called Pledge Module Completion, and it will give you one more drop-down menu where you can see how each pledge did on the individual modules, or you can produce a full report of how pledges are doing across all of the modules. Remember, quizzes and the comprehensive exam are not the be-all end-all for determining if a pledge should be initiated. It's only one of the 3 tools that you have at your disposal for evaluating pledges. As I had mentioned earlier, as part of meeting 1 and our policy, pledges are required to have a copy of the approved pledge education program. This is going to include the whole policy, excuse me, and the dates, times, and locations of each meeting. You can access and download this from the hub by clicking on the dashboard button, then on the pledging and initiations tab, and then you can download the most recent copy of the approved pledge education program to provide. And it looks similar to what you see there on your screen. And the last resource I want to point out is at the beginning of each of the first few meeting plans, you will see this chart. It's more thoroughly explained in the how to use this guide section of that web page. It is included at the top of the first couple of pledge education program meeting plans as a reminder. The curriculum is designed to accommodate a number of different learning styles. So there's lecture style, interactive activities, readings, videos, and reflection throughout the entire program. This chart will assist you in pacing your time through the curriculum, know when to paraphrase, spot where there's a suggested script, when specific information is to be communicated, and when additional resources such as the Crown and Delta, a display, or video might need to be queued up. Okay, so now diving into some of our meetings. Okay, on the pledging and initiations resource page, you will see all of the links to the meeting plans, the video tutorial, as well as any additional resources. And in particular for meeting 1 is the listing of the approved Big Brother introductions. Okay, pledge meeting 1, as I mentioned, is going to cover the pledging ceremony. And this is the only pledge education meeting where other initiated brothers are expected to attend the pledging ceremony. And following that ceremony, those brothers are expected to be dismissed, except for those that are about to be big brothers. Going to go through a quick reflection of the pledging ceremony, your big brother introduction, setting some expectations as a group, both the big brothers and new pledges, the pledges as a group, as well as the expectations a vice president for pledge education has of the pledges, and the expectations pledges have of the vice president of pledge education. You're gonna go over an overview of the pledge education program. I will tell you, when you look at it in the guide, it's going to look very daunting and overwhelming. It is very much an overview. You want to cover all of the things, but absolutely paraphrase the things that are listed in the pledge education guide when you are going over this overview. Then there's going to be a quick section for you to talk about some of the things that pledges can prepare for their first chapter meeting. So if there are some unique things that your chapter does as part of a chapter meeting, or some of the officer roles and what they give in their reports. Oh, pardon me, jumped the gun a little bit there. Or something of those natures, you'll want to let the pledges know ahead of time so that it's not completely foreign to them when they get into that first meeting. And then there is a facilitated wrap up for meeting 1. And that's what meeting 1 looks like. And then again, you will get some messaging, that the pledges will get messaging the next morning that will include the link to their first module. Please keep in mind that the online modules are designed to set up the next in-person meeting. Okay, so in this instance, the module that the pledges will review and take their quiz on prior to coming into their next in-person meeting or virtual, whichever your chapter ends up doing, we'll talk about the history of the fraternity kind of on a global scale. When you get into the in-person meeting, it's going to bring it down to a micro level and talk a little bit more specifically about our founders, personal leadership styles, introduction to the purpose of Delta Sigma Pi. There will be a fraternity timeline activity, some information on your local chapter, learning a little bit about the Greek alphabet, and again, a facilitated wrap up for meeting 2. And again, you will find the meeting plan and the tutorial video right on dsp.org/pledge guide. They'll jump in, the pledges will then get the email the next morning. Pardon me. with a module that discusses our risk management policy. Again, it's going to be more global and universal to all of our chapters, because then in your next pledge education meeting, there'll be a quick pledge check-in, just kind of seeing how everybody's doing, how are they enjoying the program in and of itself, pardon me, and just checking in on times and is everything working out for them. Going to do a quick recap of the module. So recapping our risk management policy. There is an activity talking about different levels of risk and understanding risk. Then there is an application of our risk management policy where you as the Vice President for Pledge Education will select from a couple of different scenarios that we have provided, and pledges will synthesize those scenarios and apply our risk management policy to those. There's then an exercise in ethical decision making, and talking a little bit about the state of the fraternity today and how would our founders view the state of our fraternity today. There will be a commitment to purpose, and then wrapping up meeting three. Pledges will get the next morning the links to the module for regional and local structures. Again, very global. This particular in-person meeting is going to be kind of drilling down a little bit more the individual names for your province and region and chapter. It will recap the structure of the board of directors, the organizational structure at the provincial, regional, and chapter level. It will talk, you will have the opportunity to go a little bit more in depth with your local chapter policies, specifically attendance policies is a big one, and dress code for the entirety of the chapter. There is a brief overview of CMP. There is a conversation about the purpose of professional and service events and an event planning exercise, and then a wrap up of meeting 4. And then they will be sent the link to their last online module, which is talking about leaving a legacy and living the purpose of Delta Sigma Pi. Again, when you get to the in-person meetings, there is a module recap. There will have an opportunity for pledges to reflect on the purpose of Delta Sigma Pi and do a brief personal values clarification exercise. We'll again review the organizational values and purpose, talk a little bit about some of our national events and leadership opportunities, talk about the Leadership Foundation just briefly, and specifically the chapter leadership funds. And if you are not sure what chapter leadership funds are, let me know and we will absolutely have a conversation about those. There will be some conversation about preparing for initiation, and then a meeting 5 wrap up. Once the pledges have completed meeting 5, they will then receive the next morning, similar to what they have received for the individual modules for each pledge education meeting. They will get that link for their comprehensive final exam, and it will be all of the questions that they had in the previous 4 modules. Now, keep in mind that pledges will not have access to their modules prior to the pledge meeting date that is in your approved pledge program. Okay, they will have access to prior ones, so they won't have access to meeting 3 until the day of meeting 3, but they can always go back and look at 1 and 2 as an opportunity to kind of refresh their memories prior to going into that comprehensive exam. Do want to point out, for those chapters that want to do or that are planning on doing a 4-meeting program as opposed to a 5-meeting program, there is a different meeting plan, and it shows up like this on the pledging resources page if you are doing a 4-meeting program. Couple of changes for the 4-meeting program. It does combine parts of meetings 4 and 5 of the 5-meeting program. Most of the pledges, instead of watching one module going into this last meeting, they will have to watch modules 3 and 4, pardon me, so that they are prepared fully for the meeting. Most of the pledge education meetings are scheduled to be about 60 minutes. If you're doing a 4-meeting program, this meeting 4 is actually going to be about 75 minutes. And there are some elements from meetings 4 and 5 that are removed to not make it a 2-hour meeting, but still get the pertinent information into that 75-minute time block. All right. So I don't ever want to talk about these, but I want to kind of put these in your heads ahead of time so that we can avoid them going into this year. Over the course of the last year, some of our chapters have violated our pledging and initiation policy, mostly inadvertently, and they have received official warnings from their provincial vice president as a result. And again, I wanted to touch on some of these common violations that we see so that you can avoid them for this upcoming term and year. So the first one I want to talk about is having pledge-only professional development programs. And in many cases, they're facilitated by more tenured brothers of the chapter. Professional development programs are fantastic. They are great, and they are great for the entire chapter, not just the pledges. Since pledges are required to be attending chapter meetings and events that are also required of brothers, they will still receive that education if it is built into that into your chapter development program. Hosting the career services office towards the end of a chapter meeting is not only good education, but it can also cross off a professional event from your CMP list. Everyone's resume is going to look different at various stages of their academic career. The resume used out of high school to get into college is going to look different than the one someone would submit for an internship application, which is then also going to be different than one would submit for a job application. So that we're using that resume writing workshop as an example that can be used for the entire chapter is one that I like to throw out there as we talk about the concept of the professional development activities. Any professional development activities that you had been hosting for just pledges, just shift them into your full chapter professional development program. It's going to bring added value to the older members of the chapter as well. The next is regarding Big Brother introductions. Remember, as part of the policy, Big Brother introductions are to be held as part of meeting 1, which also is going to include your pledging ceremony. The curriculum is intentionally designed with that policy in mind, with the Big Brothers having a role to play in the first meeting and only the first meeting. If you're concerned about not being able to find the right pairs in such a short amount of time, here's 2 things to keep in mind. First, a Big Brother is intended to be a mentor for the 5-week pledge education program. You're not looking to create best friends, though that can be an added benefit. A Big Brother is someone who should be available to the pledge to answer questions and help them navigate things like chapter meetings and events. Secondly, as the chapter is recruiting, you can start planning your Big Brother pairings during that process. Know before you start recruiting who is interested in being a Big Brother, and work with the senior vice president along the way to discuss who might be good fits together. The next few violations are due to outdated practices. The current policy does not include having pledge class officers, events such as professional service and fundraising events that are created, developed, or executed solely by pledges, or brother interviews. All of these things are addressed in the program curriculum and will be learned by participating in chapter meetings and events, and committees if applicable. The first few chapter meetings with pledges, chapter officers should add a minute or 2 to explain what their role is and how they execute it during their report. Split those up so your first meeting doesn't drag on for an extra hour. The chapter can also plan for a 5 to 10 minute name game also in the first few meetings to help introduce pledges to brothers. And big brothers should be encouraged to include their little brothers in casual conversations with brothers, both pre and post meetings, as well as arranging opportunities outside of chapter activities for pledges to interact with other brothers. Utilize the big brother, little brother relationship to make those connections between pledges and initiated brothers. The last piece I don't anticipate being this common this year. However, in the virtual environment we had last year, it provided our members lots of flexibility within their institutional confines. Remember, if you want or need to change your initiation date, you will need to reach out to our team immediately. Any change of initiation will still need to fit within that 20. Open it up, open things up for question and answer. I did want to reiterate a couple of websites and contacts to assist you as you're facilitating the program. Remember, you can access all the Pledge Education program resources and the Pledge Education Guide at dsp.org/pledge guide. If you have questions about the pledging and initiations policy, you can look at your approved program in the hub, or can find it under letter G of our national policies and procedures by visiting dsp.org/policies. And lastly, if you have any date changes to your program, remember, this is important to the messaging that goes out to pledges and their access to the modules. Or if you have any general questions, please email hub@dsp.org and one of our consulting team members will absolutely be able to assist you. And so that is the brief overview of the Pledge Education program. And so now I am going to take down the screen share and I am going to open things up for any questions that you all might have. Aaron, are we seeing any questions in the queue?
No, currently having no questions.
Okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the queue or to unmute. Otherwise, if you have additional questions, please feel free to email hub@dsp.org. I will hang out here, but any questions that you have, please feel free to ask. All right.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a great evening. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you all throughout Congress as well.